The Biafran invasion of the Midwest. The Nigerian-Biafran War began soon after Emeka Ojukwu's proclamation of secession. Gowon decided to first use the Federal Army's first command in what he termed a police action in an attempt to restore federal government authority in Lagos and the breakaway eastern region. The move to capture the Biafran border towns of Ogoja and Nsukka proved to be a declaration of war. Following this, in July 1967, Nigerian troops attempted to cross the Niger Bridge into Biafra. The Biafran army was able to halt its advance and disperse them. That Biafran response became an advance, leading to the taking of a large swath of the Midwestern region in a surprise maneuver that the Nigerian federal troops had not anticipated. Ojukwu explained his ambitious plan this way. Our motive was not territorial ambition or the desire of conquest. We went into the Midwest, later declared the Republic of Benin, purely in an effort to seize the serpent by the head. Every other activity in that republic was subordinated to that single aim. We were going to Lagos to seize the valiant Gowon, and we took necessary military precautions. Despite the euphoric verbal heroics espoused by Ojukwu, John Joe, the well-regarded reporter for The Observer, provided a far more subdued picture of Biafran army readiness and organization. The Biafrans stormed through the Midwest not in the usual massive impedimenta of modern warfare, but in a bizarre collection of private cars, mammy wagons, cattle, and vegetable trucks. The command vehicle was a Pigeon 404 estate car. The whole operation was not carried out by an army or even a brigade, but by at most 1,000 men, the majority poorly trained and armed, and many wearing civilian clothes because they had not been issued with uniforms. In the days preceding the Biafran invasion, I was informed by friends and relatives who lived in the Midwest region that the air there was rife with rumors of an impending federal takeover to provide it with strategic and logical access to eastern Nigeria if war broke out. The leading political and traditional leaders of the Midwest had made it clear to Gowon that they wanted no part of a civil war and that the region would be neutral in the event of any hostilities. There were several reasons for this position. Apart from a desire for peace during a precarious period, the leaders of that part of Nigeria recognized that their citizens were of a multi-ethnic background, including a sizable Igbo population. The Biafrans utilized this knowledge in mapping out their strategy. The leaders of the offensive related their reasons for occupying the Midwest as one organized to prevent the federal government from forcing Midwesterners to enlist to fight against their own people, thus undermining the mediatory role which the Midwest had been playing. Indeed, some scholars speculate that Governor David Ejo, the military governor of the Midwest, was informed of Ojukwu's intention to invade, and that both men could have very well met to discuss the implication of such an action. Brigadier Victor Banjo was one of the masterminds of this successful Biafran offensive. Ojukwu had released Banjo, a Nigerian soldier who had allegedly taken part in the January 15 coup d'etat and was detained in Ikota Ekpene prison. Banjo had been found guilty of treason by the Nigerian federal government despite his insistence of innocence. He decided to stay on Biafran soil after secession rather than return and face court-martial. Ojukwu got tactical, strategic, and political mileage from having Banjo in Biafra, and he enjoyed the prospect of having a Nigerian soldier fight for him. Against protest in certain Biafran military quarters, Ojukwu brought Victor Banjo into the State House at Enugu as one of his close military confidants and advisors. Victor Banjo, it was widely known, was not in favor of Ojukwu's secessionist aspiration, but favored a solution to Nigeria's problem that would result in the de-amalgamation of the country back into southern and northern Nigeria. In the late evening of August 14, 1967, soon after the Biafrans invaded the Midwestern region, Brigadier Banjo spoke to Midwesterners and Nigerians over the airwaves from Benin. Hundreds of thousands of listeners across the nation tuned in, expecting a detailed explanation for the invasion and a description of the long-term plans of the Biafran army. Some of the questions running through my mind and the minds of many Nigerians across the nation included the following. Who exactly was behind this invasion? Was this a temporary occupation? What was the long-term plan? What would be the reaction of Gowon and the Nigerian Federal Forces? Banjo's address was a disappointment. It sounded to me far more like a lament of the breakup of Nigeria than a speech coming from a Biafran military leader or an explanation for the invasion of Nigerian territory or Biafran secession. Banjo dedicated the first half of his message to what sounded like an overview of Nigeria's political and military history and his own travels within that establishment. In the second half of the speech, he finally got around to explaining to his listeners that the Biafran invasion was not a conquest or an invasion, but an exercise designed to enable the people of the Midwest to see the Nigerian problem in its proper perspective. Banjo appealed to all civil servants to return to work the very next day and assured them of their safety. In a veiled threat, he warned those who failed to comply that they would lose their jobs. Closely following Banjo's speech was the promulgation by the Biafrans of a new decree that established what would be known as the Republic of Benin, the area occupied by Biafran forces in the Midwestern region, and the appointment of Major Albert Nwazu Okonkwo as its military administrator. Okonkwo's administration, we were told, would supersede the previous government of the military governor David Ejo, who had been appointed by the Nigerian head of state. Major Okonkwo found his brief, some might say draconian rule. He imposed martial law, curfews, and limited accessibility, punctuated by insurrections and burdened by the assault of organized underground resistance group. Many Midwesterners passed along to me accounts of their conflicting feelings after the Biafran offensive. We, on the other hand, were being told by the Biafran propaganda machinery that we were being liberated from tyranny, but on the other, we were feeling like an occupied military zone under martial law. There was also growing discontent among the Biafran soldiers who were only there on military assignments but increasingly found themselves targets of local hostility. There were reports of Biafran troops seeking medical treatment for food poisoning suffered at the hands of cooks who had been recruited from the surrounding occupied areas. The Biafran soldiers were under siege from several fronts. According to Civil War law, Ojukwu was livid upon learning about the contents of Banjo's speech to Midwesterners following Biafra's takeover because he did not sufficiently demonstrate solidarity with his own secessionist aspirations to leave Nigeria. Ojukwu apparently also had been told that Banjo was complicit in a plot that enabled David Ejo, the erstwhile military governor of the Midwestern region, to escape from the clutches of the Biafran forces. This made it possible, the allegations continued, for Ejo to meet with the federal government in Lagos and provide the Nigerian head of state with critical military and tactical information about the Biafran offensive. It was also alleged that Banjo failed on purpose to continue the surprise offensive as planned beyond Ore in the Midwest to Nigeria's administrative capital, Lagos, and largest commercial city, Ibadan, after direct contact with agents of the federal government and Yoruba leaders. Banjo's detractors, who never trusted him in the first place, had by this time successfully labeled him a traitor and an enemy of the state of Biafra. In 1982, Ojukwu provided a glimpse of his disappointment about the role that Banjo played in the Midwest offensive. The stop in Benin was the beginning of the era. My plan for that operation was that by 5:30 in the morning, the Biafran troops would be in the peripheries of Lagos. A counterpoint can be obtained from the Nigerian General Olusegun Obasanjo's memo, My Command, an account of the Nigerian Civil War, 1967 to 1970. In it, Obasanjo creates some doubt as to whether or not Victor Banjo intentionally refused to proceed further to Ibadan and Lagos as directed. A renowned social critic and one discussed Banjo's request for me to grant him unhindered access to Ibadan and Lagos at any price. Both the requests and the price were turned down. So did Banjo, without Ojukwu's consent, make a tactical decision not to proceed beyond Ore after the military intelligence available to him demonstrated that it could be a suicide mission? Was Victor Banjo a traitor or a misunderstood hero? I think posterity will debate this question for a long time because Banjo was subsequently executed by Ojukwu and did not leave written documents to prove or disprove his innocence.